To God be the glory.
Welcome back. Well, it's been a long time coming, but we finally got to the point where we're on what's going to be the last lesson in this series. Now, I recognize that there are still more things left in Mansour's book, but we have brought you far enough, if you've been able to continue working on the various things that we've studied, brought you far enough that you can proceed on your own in Mansour's grammar. And what we want to do is just spend a very short time, just a few minutes, reviewing some of the key points that's found in Lesson 18 that we have a review points of Lessons 12 through 17 in our textbook. I'm on page 104, and I just want to isolate a couple of these main points for the sake of emphasis, and then that will be all that we'll cover in Mansour's book, and I'll briefly discuss what we're going to do in our last class, the one immediately following this one. All right, first of all, I want to point out point number 1 that says the simple form of the Hebrew verb is known as kal. That's spelled Q-A-L. That's just a simple form, and that is what we have been learning. Second thing, and we'll go to the board to write this, participles follow the pattern of having, just like the book does it, say these are our letters, has, like that, followed by a serre. All right, that's the simple pattern that's found. For example, if we were going to write the verb to sit, then we would have yo shev, like that. Okay, that would be the imperfect, whereas the perfect completed action would look like that, ya shav. All right. Also, we have learned, dropping down to number 4 in the review, we're just covering some of the high points here. The principal parts of the active participle lamad, to learn, are. All right, let's say, write this real big. That's what we're talking about, is lamad. The principal parts would be lomed, like that. And then the feminine would be written like that. Let me see. Got to get my dalet in there before I get my hay. That'd be lo medah, like that. That'd be the feminine. All right, and then we also have to remember that is the form that it doesn't occur very often, but most of the time what you're going to have is this right here. That's what occurs most often and in biblical Hebrew. So that would be the feminine that would coincide with the masculine that we had up there. All right, then we'll slide over here. We want to do the same thing with the plural. It would go lo madim, like that, with the shavah underneath the mem. And then to do the same thing, making it feminine plural, lo medot, just like that. So basically, what we're looking at is 1, 2, 3, 4. The masculine singular, he is learning, she is learning, they men are learning, they women are learning. Okay, those 4 forms are the things that you need to learn. All right, another thing that we have learned, and I'm going here to number 9, is based on this particular word, poal. All right, and it's every root of the Hebrew verb consists of 3 letters. Therefore, we call the first letter a pay root verb, the second letter an ayin, and the third letter a lamed. For example, if we wanted to look at all of these particular words right here, word for to know, to go out, and we'll add to beget or to bear. Whoops. Yalad. All right. You can tell that we've been working on this for a while. Yalad, and then how about to dwell and to sit? Yashav. All right, we take these four. What would you say is characteristic of these four? Well, if you say they are all pay yod verbs. Yod, 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 and yod. They're all pay yod verbs. All right, you would be correct if that's what you answered. All right, now if you were wanting to isolate this one yet further, you'd say it's a lamed aleph verb. Or this one is a lamed ayin verb. All right, so that's what numbers 9 and 10 are trying to tell us. All right, let's go on then and look at what they're trying to say about the perfect tense on number 11. The perfect tense of zakar. Once again, this is our triliteral that we're trying to remember. If you want to say, well, what we'll do is we'll just take it and not have to write the word out each time. All right, there's our word right there. We want to say, I remember. Then all you have to do is zakarti, just like that. Keep your triliteral root, you add T on the end. If you want to make it you masculine, then all you do is add a tav like that. It'd be zakarta. If you want to make it feminine, the only thing you change is this to a shava. That'd be pronounced zakart. All right. If you want to say he remembers, then you just take your root and you put the pointing like that. If you want to say she remembers, then all you have to do is add your comets hey, and this is reduced to a shava in this case. All right. If you want to say we remember, then all you have to do is add nu onto your triliteral root. If you want to say you masculine, talking about a group of men, remember, you add tim, just like that. And that would be zakar tim, just like that. Actually, that would be reduced to a shava in second person, masculine and plural. Zakar tin for feminine. Then if you want to say they remember, once again, you keep your triliteral root right there. And the vowels would change slightly, which is okay. Zakeru. And that's both masculine and feminine on they remember. All right, another thing that is emphasized in the board, that I will emphasize here on the board, has to do with the demonstrative pronoun. That's number 13 in your book. Ze is masculine. Zot is feminine. And then ele is both masculine and feminine plural. All right, so what we have then are the three main demonstrative pronouns. This is a man, zaish. This is a woman, zot, isha zot, and so on and so forth with the demonstrative pronouns. Very important. All right, another key lesson that we've had that we want to review happens to be number 18. Remember, we've got four inseparable prepositions. We have lamed, we have the base, the kaf, and we have the mem. All right, these are all inseparable prepositions, meaning that they're attached to the words. This means to or for, in, with, by, as, like, from, just like that. The four inseparable prepositions that are attached just to the word. All right, now remember some things about these, that they do assume the pointing that was on the definite article. All of these just kick that definite article right out and steal its pointing when it becomes inseparable. And so that's something that you need to remember. All right? So if we were wanting to say in the house, or in a house, that would be just like this, bebayit. But if we want to say in the house, change it just like that, babayit. All right, so that's basically what we're saying about that, and that point right there is number 19 in your book. All right, number 21. It's again skipping over just some of the high points here. Number 21 is talking about this very important word right here. Asher. Has 4 basic meanings: who, whom, which, are, that. And when we look at Asher, we got to remember that in Hebrew it must be there, even though in English we may not need to have it there. In Hebrew it is a must. All right. Also, we've talked about and we've learned about this little thing right here. Et. This is the sign of the direct object. When there is something that is definite, then you're going to have this sign of the direct object. And this, as I mentioned before, is a very, very helpful tool in biblical research. All right, so when you have something that's receiving the action of the verb, and whatever is receiving the action of the verb is definite, then you can have it. So if you're saying he is eating an apple, then you wouldn't have this. But if he is eating the apple, then you would have the sign of the definite article. All right, those are the major lessons of the things that we're going to consider here in Lesson 18. All right, and as I mentioned before, that does conclude a study of the book Menahem Mansour's Biblical Hebrew Step by Step. Obviously, there are a number more lessons that could be studied, but I believe that at this particular point you're capable of going on yourself. Hopefully your pronunciation is getting good enough where you can pronounce these words, continue to verbalize them, and you'll be able to proceed along with these lessons, and it will be very helpful to you. Now, we are going to have one more study together. By having gone through this class and learned the things that you've learned, you're now able to utilize and get the maximum benefit of studying and using a number of the helpful Hebrew tools that I introduced in lesson number 1. All right, and so in our next lesson, we'll take some time and look at these special books on how they can help you in your study of the biblical books of the Old Testament. Well, we've come a long way together in learning biblical Hebrew, and in this class I want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that are available that will heighten your work and studying the Hebrew Scriptures and make you more acquainted and better acquainted with God's Word so that you can look at the tremendous truths that are revealed in the Old Testament Scriptures, do some word studies of your own that will just really enhance your own personal study and, of course, increase your understanding of the Old Testament Scriptures and the New Testament Scriptures as well. Now, in this class, at the conclusion of this part of the class, I'm going to be showing you some of the work that I've done in some of my study that might give you an indication of some of the things that you can do in the knowledge that you have of biblical Hebrew. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you of some of the books that we talked about at the beginning of the class, and also talk a little bit about some books that we did not introduce, but still might be something that you'd be interested in acquiring. First of which, I want to remind you about flashcards. There are flashcards that are available. This is my own personal box. All they were is just a box of blank cards where you could write anything that you would want to write on it. What I would do I would write the Hebrew word on one side, the English definition on the other side, and then I also in the top corner would write the number of the lesson of which it went along with in Mansour's book. And so that might be something that you'd want to do. Now there are professionally produced cards that you can purchase that already have the Hebrew words written on them. And let me hold up here an example of one. We'll zoom in on that for you to give you an idea of what it looks like. All right, here we see that we have our Hebrew word zakar. And right on the other side, in the Cal Perfect, remember or mention. And in the Hifil, which is another one of the 7 binyanim, to remind or to make mention. And so those are professionally produced cards that already have the answers for you, and they're also keyed with the number 32 right there for you. So this would be something that would be helpful for you to use. All right, let's talk about some other things that would be helpful for you to have in your own library. I also made mention that there is a second edition of Mansour's book that basically covers biblical texts, and that there are cassette tapes. If you're still struggling a little bit with your pronunciation, then these are professionally produced tapes by Baker Bookhouse, and it's not Menahem Mansour's voice on the tape, but nevertheless they continue, and there is a tape for Volume 1 that goes right along with the lessons that we've already studied, and you may want to purchase that. Also, now that we've been dealing with verbs a little bit, I want to remind you about Halkin's book on 201 Hebrew verbs. This particular book is one that will just conjugate those verbs right down for you and help you in that. Also, if you want to just work on your vocabulary, we have George M. Landis' book, A Student's Vocabulary of Biblical Hebrew. And this particular thing will break down the various books or the various words and the number of occurrences that they have. And so those books would also be something that would be very helpful to you. A lexicon would something like Gesenius, and there are other types of lexicons available. I have one here by Benjamin Davidson that you might also want to acquire one or the other. It doesn't really make any difference. This one is published by Zondervan. This one's published by Baker Bookhouse. And these particular books basically do the same thing. Let's say, for example, that you're reading along in the Hebrew Scriptures and you see a word that you just cannot understand. You don't know what that word means or what it is. You can look it up right in here and it will break it down for you. It'll give you the definitions. It'll give you a couple of occurrences of where that word occurs. And it is also keyed. It has numbers on the side. It's keyed to Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. Now, the analytical Greek lexicon is a little bit different in that what it does is it takes the exact form that you have, and perhaps you were not able to recognize that that was a suffix, or you weren't able to recognize that that was a prefix or an infix, whatever the case may be. And so you're wanting to go and find out exactly what is the triliteral root of this word. Well, Davidson's book right here, An Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon, is the one that you'd want to get, and there are some others that virtually do the same thing. All right, some other books that I want to talk a little bit about, and is this one right here, which is called Kaver La Torah. And this particular book is basically a children's book. I talked a little bit about that before. And what it does is you heard the name Torah, La Torah right there. And let me open it up and show you an example of what this book does for you. And you can see that it's written very simply with big, large print. And I'll go over here to the other side. Each lesson begins with basic vocabulary words which are given for you in the back. And then you basically have, in children's form, the story in this particular one of creation. You can see the picture in the fall. You can see the picture of Adam and Eve there. It talks about that. And then in the very bottom down here, What you have is the actual Hebrew text that you would find in the Hebrew Bible. All right, this thing is, although it is a little paperback, is one that looks like this, and it's called Chaver la Torah, and it's a fairly expensive little book considering how thin it is, but nevertheless would be a helpful thing to get, especially if you just want to practice your reading and your translating and have something that's not overly complicated right at first. This would be an excellent book to get. All right, we'll consider some other things here. Of course, the Biblia Hebraica, the Hebrew Bible, is something that is a must. Obviously, we've been going through all this so we can get to the point where we can open this, we can read it, and we can understand what it's saying. This does come in two different sizes. It comes in a large and it comes in a smaller, easier to handle size, and you would be interested in securing that. All right, I also mentioned the 5-volume Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament. Once again, I want to say that I do not subscribe to the theology that's taught in these books, but I do believe that as far as their word study and their background study and their discussion of the meanings of these words, that it is a helpful tool, and one that if you're wanting to do some serious word study work in the Hebrew Old Testament, this would be a good one to get. All right, there is another 2-volume set that does word studies, Theological Word Book of the Old Testament by Laird Harris, Gleason Archer, and Bruce Watke. And this particular book isolates a number of important Hebrew words and does what I consider to be a fairly thorough job of studying those words, giving you examples of how they occur in the Bible text. And so you might want to secure a copy of this 2-volume set published by Moody Press. All right, let me give you some examples of the work that you can do in the Hebrew Scriptures. Some of the work that I've done that I believe has heightened my understanding and my work in the Old Testament Scriptures that have been a tremendous blessing to me in understanding God's Word. Some of these are charts that I have here, or charts that I've made up, isolating keywords and trying to use sort of an exegetical or a Bible study method that enables me to look at the Hebrew words, study those Hebrew words, and see the significance and the meanings of those words, and then go back to the text and talk about the number of times those words occur. All right, let's look at some examples of this. First, in the book of Joshua. Joshua is a book, a lesson about the gifts of God to His people. We find that the Lord God is going to give. There's our Hebrew word Natan. 68 times that word occurs, and that's one of our vocabulary words in our lesson, so you know that word. The Lord is going to give the land, Aretz, you know that word too, to the people as a possession, Yarash, for a place of rest, Ruach. Now those words don't occur all that many times, but nevertheless they're important words because they normally occur in the text that are really emphasizing what this book is all about. And so what we can do is by putting these words together, make a thesis statement. Or we can find, such as in this case, a verse that really describes what the book has been trying to say. For example, Joshua 21, 43, and 44 says, "So the Lord gave," there's one of our key words, "to Israel all the land," there's another one of our key words, "which He swore to give to their fathers, and they possessed," there's another one of our key words, "possessed it, and lived in it, and the Lord gave them rest on every side, according to all that He had sworn to their fathers. And no one of all their enemies stood before them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hands." All right, so that's basically the focus of the book of Joshua. So no matter what you're studying in the book of Joshua, what you can see is this is the point, that the Lord is giving the land. Even though they fought, they didn't earn the land. God gave them the land, and that's seen by the emphasis of the word give. All right, let's look at another one. How about going to one of the minor prophets? And we'll go to Micah. The theme of Micah: the Lord makes His loving but final appeals to his people. All right, here we find the word here, Shama, the word of the Lord, is a key word in the book of Micah. It says, hear now what the Lord is saying. Notice that it occurs a number of times. In chapter 6 and verse 1 is what I'm quoting, but it also occurs in 1, 2, and 3, 1, and 9, and so on and so forth. Hear and walk according to his word. So by learning the Hebrew words and seeing that there are key words in the various books, such as Micah, we find that though all the people walk, each in the name of his God, as for us, we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Micah chapter 4 and verse 5. So if this is done, one will become a part of the saved, the remnant. It says, I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. Micah 6 and verse 8, another example of the key verse. All right, let's look at yet another thing that we can do, or another way that we can study. How about the theme of Proverbs? A book like Proverbs has a tremendous number of words that occurs over and over again. But by breaking it down, we can see that it is a compilation of sayings intended to direct life. Hayah. Hayim 32 times. Basically, a person, as we go through the Proverbs, has a choice to go one way or the other, to either become a fool or to become a wise man. And by studying the Proverbs, we find that the fool is described by a number of characteristics, just like the wise man. The fool is wicked. The word rasha occurs 86 times. He is self-confident, kasil. He is a sluggard or lazy, 15 times. He's evil, bad, or immoral, 47 times. There's our word ra. Is simple or naive, fati. On the other side, the wise man, the chakam. He has knowledge, yada. He has understanding. He is considered of his friends and his neighbors. Reah is righteous, Sadiq. And he guards his words. A number of different ways of expressing that point. So making the right choice is vital, because judgment, mishpat, 16 times occurs. For man, the judgment comes from the Lord, chapter 29 and verse 36. So by looking at these Hebrew words, we're able to put together a pretty good little study. All right, how about if we want to do something that's a little bit more detailed in using our Hebrew? Let's go to another chart and look at Proverbs 22 and verse 6. This has always been a very troublesome passage for some. You're familiar with it. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. What I've done is I've taken the verse and I've broken it down word by word and looked up BDB, means Brown Driver Briggs. I've looked up the meaning of these words in Brown Driver Briggs. And the first one for the word train, hanach, train, dedicate, to make experience, to accustom, as one does a horse by bit in his mouth or rope, to get him used to something. That's the way Brown Driver Briggs defines that word. Na'ar is a word that means boy, lad, or youth. General word that describes all from babes to teenagers. And then some other biblical references in Brown Driver Briggs reference. And then the phrase alfi, according to or in accordance. Then I looked up the word de reko, his way or his word, his path. And then the adverb moreover, also, yea, when at the time, ki, you grow old, he shall, or when he shall grow old. And then the last word, he will not turn aside or depart or apostatize, Brown Driver Briggs. Okay, so we've done a pretty good word study of all of the meanings of the words in this verse. And so by looking at that, we come to a conclusion. The verse says that we are able to get a child accustomed to walking the right path or living the right lifestyle. The word chanak means to get someone used to something, like getting a horse used to a bridle or bit. Thus, we are to see that our children get used to living the godly lifestyle so that they become comfortable with it and resign to it. If this is done, they will keep walking the path with which they are accustomed when they grow old. There is more implied than teaching. We must get the child accustomed to doing the Lord's will. This we do by showing him how and by doing righteous things with him. All right, so that's all part of the word to train or to dedicate or make experience. All right, let's look at yet another chart. Shows us some things. Toledot is a word that we ran across a number of times in our reading. This is the word Moses used to divide Genesis. And so we see that we have an inspired outline of the book of Genesis. It means generations are descendants. And notice how it's broken down. You got chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 4, verse 26, the Toledot of the heavens and the earth. Chapter 5, 1 through 6, 8, the descendants of Adam. Chapter 6, 9 through 29, the descendants of Noah and descendants of the sons of Noah, and so on. And this is a word that Moses used through inspiration in dividing the various parts in Genesis. All right, and then we'll go yet to one more chart and looking at various ways that we can do this as we scan the remaining part of the breakdown of the book of Genesis, finally ending in chapter 15, verse 26 with the descendants of Jacob. All right, so 10 divisions, all based on this particular word, Toledot. All right, then one other chart that we'll take a minute and look at here. These are the names. All right, this is just basically taking these words and finding out what they mean, their definitions, and always knowing what the meaning of words can heighten our understanding. For example, the word Adam, comes from Adamah, which is the word for ground, since Adam come from the ground. The word Eve is a word that comes from Hayah, which means living. Eden is a word that that has its root meaning luxury or delight. The word Noach means comfort. Avram means mighty father, and of course God changed his name to Avraham. That means father of a multitude. Sarah means princess. Ishmael means God heard. You see the Shama and then the El at the end. Shama means hear. El means God. God heard. Ishmael. Isaac, Yatzchak, he laughed. Jacob, Yaakov, means supplanter or heel grabber. Edom, Adon, means red. And then the name Israel, you have the word Shar with the yod at the beginning of it, and then El at the end, meaning he who strives with God. Or you can do another sort of a breakdown. Let's go to another chart and look at how we can take, for example, the book of Daniel, the various names for Jehovah. Now, there are large sections of Aramaic in the book of Daniel, but nevertheless, we can do some pretty good study by looking at the recurring words. And in this particular book, notice how the book of Daniel exalts God. For example, we have the Aramaic Elah, and then, of course, the Hebrew word for God, which we've learned, El, and then the word or the name Elohim, which we're going to look at in just a minute in Brown Driver Briggs. And then just scanning down the rest of that, the word the Lord occurs a number of times in Daniel. Most High, Highest One, God of Heaven, King of Heaven, Lord of Heaven, the Great God, and the God of Gods. And so what we see is that there are a number of times that we have the references to God, all of which in the book of Daniel are meant to exalt Him. All right, let's go back and take a look at what we can learn in Brown Driver Briggs. All right, you recall that Brown Driver Briggs is the one book, a Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament. This is a tremendous book that's going to be able to help you in your biblical research. And I mentioned as we were studying through our lessons that we were going to talk about one particular word, olam. All right, let's go to a photocopied page right out of Brown Driver Briggs on this particular word, olam. All right, now what you see is it's a word that means of long duration, of antiquity, futurity, and that little ion with the little slash by it, this is his way of abbreviating. But notice that he gives you a number of times And then you have a number 1 that goes down there a ways, that dropping down about 6 lines, you have a number 1 refers of past time, ancient time, or days of old, ancient people, old ways, places, and so on. And it's filled with a number of biblical references, so you can study this word. And what you'll see by looking at olam in a respected lexicon like Brown Driver Briggs is that the word olam does not mean forever and ever and ever. The context has to determine how long is meant by the usage of this word olam. Even though our translators usually translated it forever, it doesn't always mean that. God can bring something that was intended to be forever, or initially given as forever, to an abrupt close. All right, let's look at another example in Brown Driver Briggs, and this is the word Elohim. All right, now on this particular one, this is a copy of one of the newer editions. You see that number 430 to the left of Elohim. What that is telling you is that Elohim is found in Strong's Concordance 430, so Strong's and the Brown Driver Briggs are cross-referenced to each other. And then after Elohim, you have a little number right there, 2,570. That, I believe, references the number of times that word occurs in the Hebrew Old Testament. All right, then you see dropping down the third line, it says plural in number, rulers, judges, either as divine representatives at sacred places, reflecting divine majesty and power. All right, and then he gives you a number of references in places both biblical and extra-biblical that you can look at. All right, let's go across the page and look at number 2 here on this. All right, there we see that we have a number of references. There's number 3 there. That's okay. And just kind of see the way he breaks it down. He gives you a number 2 and then a number 3, various definitions. For example, in that plural intensive can mean God or goddess. And then dropping down to number 3, it means the example of the true God, or Yahweh is God, and so forth. All right, and then one other book that I want to show you. And this is the book that we were talking a little bit about. And this is the Armstrong Busby Carr book. And this particular one, let's now show a page out of that on the screen. It is a very helpful book. This is an attempt to meet the need for Old Testament translation tool on the level of Sake Kubo's Reader's Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament. With the student and preacher in view, it's been developed as a means to more rapid reading of the Hebrew text. Words that occur 50 times or fewer in the Old Testament are listed verse by verse in the order of their occurrence. Nouns and adjectives appear in their vocabulary form. Now what you see is the verse number, like there you got number 7, the expanse, and then it occurs 9 times in Genesis, 17 times in the Old Testament. Dropping down to verse 11, to cause to sprout. One time it refers in the book itself, and then one time in the Old Testament, but yet the third number gives the frequency of all the stems of a given verb. And then that number outside the parentheses, like the word species there just before verse 12, 568, that is keyed to Strong's Concordance as well. And so you're able to do, or excuse me, that's keyed to Brown Driver Briggs. Keyed to Brown Driver Briggs, so that you can save time in looking up that word right there in Brown Driver Briggs. So this is a very helpful book. All right, that was kind of a quick survey of the various things, the various tools that are available to you, especially when you're wanting to do translating. These things can be very helpful. And I hope that in our time together that you feel that it's been a good effort. There may be some tapes that you need to replay and review the lessons that have been given, but nevertheless, we do this for the glory of God, that we can become better students of His Word, looking at the words that He's given us in their original tongue, so that we can become better students and more knowledgeable of God's Word. I hope that this time together in this study has been a blessing to you.